I might not be the smartest guy on the planet, but I do read a lot of business books. And one of the ones that I recently read was The Infinite Game by Simon Sinek. And there are 3 main points from this video that I hope that you can take away from The Infinite Game, as they really have impacted me and my business every single time I think about them, honestly. Number 1, focus on values. So this may sound like some esoteric kind of BS thing that a lot of companies talk about. They have their CSR statements and they have the way that they talk about their corporate social responsibility, but none of it really means anything when you get down to it, and you often see through the facade that they're showing when they're talking to people. One of the most impactful things that Simon brought up was the fact that in the statements of executives at companies, what often happens is the beginning of the statement anchors what they value the most. So at the beginning of a lot of these statements, they'll say that they care about shareholders, and then they say they care about making good profits. Then they say they care about cutting costs. Then they say, lastly, whatever arbitrary nice thing they're going to say that they want to do for the consumer, and then maybe their employees. Reordering the way that you talk about what you're going to do in your business. So first and foremost, bringing value to consumers. Secondly, making your employees feel heard. And then third, profits. And fourth, maybe shareholders, is actually a better way to go about it if you're trying to play the infinite game. The difference between a finite game and an infinite game can be easily articulated in something like sports. So a finite game is one football game that you're going to be playing. So I'm a big fan of the Kansas City Chiefs. When they inevitably make it to the Super Bowl, they are going to play one last finite game. And in that game, there is 2 agreed upon teams going against each other with the same set of rules, trying to win during a specific time frame. So once the Chiefs inevitably beat the 49ers in the Super Bowl again, they will have completed a finite game and have won a Super Bowl. However, the infinite game of the NFL is not finished. A perfect example of how somebody won a finite game recently was the fact that the LA Rams won the finite game of the Super Bowl last year, but they did not play the infinite game of being an NFL team very well because they traded away all of their draft picks for the next few years, and they are in a hole and will not be able to be a decent team for a little while unless all their players that they draft in late rounds end up doing well and the current players they have keep staying healthy. Unfortunately for the Rams, it seems like they kind of went all in and they're not going to be a great franchise for a little while. However, in business, there really isn't many finite games outside of arbitrary goals of quarters. And for me, I started to get away from caring about revenue in specific months or specific quarters and focusing on giving value to consumers. And what ended up happening was I found a lot of positive growth come through the fact that I just gave more value to consumers and treated my employees well. The product that was being put out got better. My employees were satisfied, and the next thing I knew, I was much happier with what I was putting out, and so was everyone else, which means more money for me because the algorithm pushed my stuff out more. Number 2, stop competing against other people. Start competing against yourself. I actually have done this for a fairly long time. For a little bit, I was concerned with being the most frequent uploader in the productivity app community, but now I'm more focused on giving as much information as possible to the productivity community, which is an inherently different thing. At Rise Productive, we have a mission statement that I made based on this book, and it is as follows. Empower those focused on intentional living to align themselves and others through impactful content, high-value products, and dynamic services. After having read this book, I have focused more on every piece of content being impactful. I have focused on every product I put out being more high value, and I have focused on my services to be more dynamic and reach different people better. And all these 3 things together, as you notice, are focused on not me making things, but delivering things to people better. The first rendition of this vision statement was basically create content that is entertaining and a bunch of yada yada. But I actually did work on this vision statement, and I think it truly emulates what this book is trying to tell you to do, which is focus on what you can do for your consumers and your employees more so than what competitors are doing. I don't really care what other productivity app YouTubers are doing outside of maybe some different things to improve my video quality. I don't really care how often they upload. All I care about is giving as much value and impactful content to the consumers that I'm in front of as possible on this channel and my main channel. And the third thing that I learned from this book is that I'm pretty sure shareholder theory ruined capitalism. Well, at least this book would make me think that, because I actually read shareholder theory in college due to the fact that I got my MBA, and outside of the fact that I was very well convinced of shareholder theory in college, after having read all this stuff, it seems to me that the reason for all these really poor situations where people get fired for arbitrary goals and get fired for not meeting these goals when they really didn't have to, or budget cuts happening, or promotions happening because of certain random metrics that don't matter too much, but they're moving the shareholder value up in theory. It made me realize that makes companies do things in a way that is ethically flawed. There's this concept called ethical fading, which Simon brings up a lot in this book, and it really articulates a couple examples that were so impactful to me. For example, the ethical fading that happened with the EpiPens a couple years ago. They talked about how Mylan was increasing the price more and more, and since it wasn't legally unethical.
Senator Kevin O'Toole called Mylan's EpiPen price hikes pompous and greedy.
They just kept doing it. And the same happened with Wells Fargo in the early 2000s and even the 2010s when they were having their employees they were asking their employees to reach such high sales goals that their employees ended up making fake accounts.
Close to $2 trillion in terms of his balance sheet.
That cap on growth came after reports of fraud at the bank emerged in the 2010s.
We all know about Wells Fargo's fake account scandal,
which would charge the customers of Wells Fargo money for accounts they didn't ask for. And this kind of ethical fading is usually boiled down to the fact that everyone's so focused on increasing shareholder value that it causes people to do things that are unethical. It causes businesses to make arbitrary goals that cut budgets in random places that shouldn't matter. I mean, I've noticed it in my workplace with marketing. You'll see things that are clearly a one-to-one improvement get cut for arbitrary reasons because of the times. And on top of that, I truly believe that companies that focus more so on a value-driven mission, like CVS, who had banned their cigarette sales and tobacco sales, actually leads to better shareholder value. But in the short term, these people are playing finite quarterly games and their companies end up suffering, whereas companies that have long-term visions end up doing better. But everyone's so focused on the finite game of shareholder theory that companies fizzle out and die like Kodak did with their amazing film company until film wasn't a thing. Definitely recommend you read The Infinite Game by Simon Sinek. Top tier book, just like this video, on how to improve your business and productivity even more.